Okay, so this is Esoteric Book Club, and this is the second meeting that we're doing for the Cycles of Opportunity by Carole Beckham. And we're reading through chapters 1 and 4 and discussing just what we read through those chapters, talk about keywords, if we have any questions, talk about that, our personal experiences with these concepts, and then move on to discussing the next phase of book club.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
This is Annalisa and I'm Evelyn, and if everyone else is being recorded, your names are on there too. So everyone else is here. And yeah, we'll get started. So chapter 1 is giving us a rundown on spirituality, I guess, in a sense. She tries to start out as wide as possible, and she's kind of moved slowly in to the specifics of certain themes or topics. And so there's a lot of themes that she talks about throughout this whole thing. She kind of is just like glossing over spirituality in a sense and what it means in an esoteric perspective. So on page 3, there's a few things that I wrote down, and like the law of correspondences is something that she talks about a lot, and what that means. And I wrote a quote down that I liked from that page, which is, if we can deduce a fact about our own life, we can then look for its parallel in higher life. So the microcosm versus macrocosm and what that means on a personal level, spiritual level, and also collective level. Yeah, do you have anything to say about that?
Sure, yeah. I liked in chapter 1 that she talks about the neutrality of the universe. I don't know if that was something that you guys picked up on or liked, but I think that in terms of the modern conversation of manifestation and the way the universe gets talked about, there's a lot of our own personality projections, and a lot of people be like, why is this happening to me, or why is, what's good, what's bad, what's this? And so I kind of liked that she began that chapter with discussing kind of what the universe is this like neutral energy. So we posted that quote today on Instagram because we both really liked it. I'm going to read it. The energy of the universe is neutral. There is no such thing as beneficent energies and malefic energies, just as there is not good or bad electricity. It is the common usage of the various types of energies by humankind today that causes people to state that the energies themselves are imbued with these qualities. However, different cosmic and planetary beings do decidedly have their own specialized energies, many of which have become common knowledge to humanity today through the science of astrology. And I think too, like, that's kind of the way that we see saints or ascended masters or gods or goddess energies that we're working with, or demonic energies. There's kind of like these personality energies that are out there that are not, that's not the universe. So I think that the separation that she makes between all of that is really cool in the beginning, because it helps lay that foundation for what it means to work with various types of energies, which then plays into the rays a lot, I think.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that there are multiple perspectives of one thing. So the law of correspondences is as above, so below, as within, so without. And that's bringing us to a understanding of how planetary energy works with human consciousness and human understanding of reality in and of itself. We talk about time in this chapter a lot, and how time is a spiral versus linear. That is a cyclical experience, and that we have access essentially to past, present, future at all times. And to become aware of all of those 3 different perspectives is becoming holistic in your perspective of the universe in and of itself. So being able to identify your inner world and how it's being affected by your outer world is the way that we look at horoscopes and astrology. It's a way of like searching externally for internal validation. Like, oh, what's going on with Mercury right now? I feel like crazy, you know, what's going on external of me that I'm being affected by, and vice versa. And so the understanding that reality is a reflection of the internal realm at all times is like the first step of becoming aware of all things that are connected and spiral in nature. So then she goes into the spiral of evolution, which I have some fun images here to show. This concept of the spiral being life. You know, the Earth is a sphere. Our galaxy moves in cyclical motion. The Earth rotates. The moon is round. Like, it's spherical. It's non-linear. There's hardly anything in life that occurs naturally in a straight line. And the thought process of time as linear is totally reflective of the evolution of consciousness and our evolution as a scientific humanity, or how we quantify reality. You know, I would say that it's fascinating to think about flat earthers and their perception of the universe, and like how they can I see them as like old paradigm perspective, because it's dual in nature. Like, if Earth is flat, then there's a top and a bottom, and it's a line. And to me, it's more symbolic of the evolution of our consciousness. And there's a sect of human that's kind of like holding on to this idea of binary existence, and their way of trying to explain shadows and the sun's movement and the Earth's rotation is like so like mental gymnastics to try to understand how that would even work. It's almost like, what is that? Was it Schrodinger's rule or something? That's like, if the most simple explanation is the most obvious one, or like if you have like 15 extra steps to explain something, a reality, then it's probably not the right process of understanding reality. So yeah, I just thought that was a fun thought to imagine, because like obviously everything's spherical, and how kind of like masculine patriarchal is it to like think that everything's a line or a straight line, when the Earth is like a feminine earth, like a life vessel that holds creation in it. But it does require that like penetration of masculinity to create this, to move the spiral. Then like a simple straight circle is flat in and of itself until there's a point of existence that pushes reality down into one direction or the other. And then that goes into the spiral too. She's saying how spirals of reality can change. They can go inward, they can go outward based off of positivity or negativity of thought. So if you have, I was having really fun visualizations while reading this chapter, because I was seeing like, so there's a point of existence and then like a spiral goes out from that one point. Or if you go inverse or reverse of that point of existence, and you're going backwards into another spiral, but that's still an existence in and of itself, no matter what. So it's all real and it's all valid, which is another thing that she says too in the book, which is every experience that ever happens on Earth with anyone ever is valid. Every single thought, emotion, feeling, stupid comment is valid for some damn reason, and it's all happening for a purpose. And so, yeah, the dumb, stupid comment might be like an inverse of evolution, but it's still a purposeful inverse for some reason. We don't know it.
It's
We're not God.
polarity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what how I see that. Because it's like the flat earthers are living, like we're all living a flat earth experience, even though we know the earth is round, right? Like we're vertical beings. We like stand vertically and then we walk horizontally on the earth in a flat way. So it's like, of course we thought that the earth was flat way back when, because we didn't know. Like we were just perceiving what we were experiencing at the base root of what we could understand at that time. And I feel like that's why it's so cool to see the spiral as the evolution of consciousness, because when we get outside perception, and then that's when it opens up into that. But in terms of saying what you were saying, like every perception is valid. It's like, yeah, we're perceiving a flat world, even though we're in a round container.
There's a reason for it. For some, it's not for us to understand. It's for them. It's something that they need to go on their own journey with and figure out for themselves.
So you're like, right, your perception is flat. I understand that. Like I walk on the flat surface too.
It's flat right now, but when you go all the way out there, it's not so flat. Yeah, but it's so true. I guess it is flat right now. Okay, fine. You're right.
That's the duality of the valid perception.
Mm-hmm. And the term involution. So involution is the involving of spirit into matter. So the process of becoming denser. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Dense.
Yeah.
Dumb as a rock. Because you're involving from spirit into earth matter, like the core of the earth. Like how, I mean, maybe that's one form of reincarnation, of like the inverse of evolution, where you have to devolve so much that you have to.
Well, is that dying? Dying inverse evolution?
The physical on the physical plane,
right?
It is,
yeah,
which is one of the 7 planes. So we're supposed to memorize from page.
Where did everyone go? Did you get rid of them?
I got rid of them.
Oh.
Well, I just didn't know. There they are. See, they're back.
I like seeing my friends.
I was trying to be professional. This is going on YouTube, but that's fine.
It's book club.
It is book club.
Evelyn. It's a club.
My Scorpio rising. What can I say?
What it's worth, we can still see the spiral.
Okay. Or
at least I can, in my view.
Cool.
Should we ask what people think about that?
Well, I have a question for them in terms of with the terminology from chapter 1. I have a couple of questions. Because one thing that she talks about a lot is the solar logos. And so logos is a term that's used a lot to explain a type of consciousness. And my question for you guys is, what does solar logos mean to you, or what is your perception of that word? And you can find it on page 5. I think there's probably a lot of terms on that. Let me see what page exactly it was in. It's on page 7, towards the top part of the page. And then the bottom of page 6, that she talks about solar logos and just what those general terms mean, because that's something that is an important concept to know. So the floor is all yours, guys. Solar logos.
Well, it's my first time like reading about solar logos, and it wasn't something that I had heard about before. So it's a cool way of kind of thinking about, I guess, like God or goddess energy, it was my takeaway from it, like kind of the energy that like manifests in our galaxy and our world and kind of brings matter into form, or brings energy into form.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. What? Look at me.
Yeah, that was my hot take.
Yeah, totally. I like
Hot
that.
off the press.
I think there's definitely a God-like quality to the solar logos, especially for us since we're alive, you know, due to the sun. So I think that solar consciousness is godly
Mm-hmm.
for sure for us and within ourselves, right? With what the sun represents to us,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Wow.
Cool. Anybody else?
So I don't know if you guys can hear me. Sorry, I live on a pretty busy street, so I turn it on mute. Everyone.
Got it.
It's been a while since I read the first chapter, a few weeks. So sorry if I was summarizing it real quick, but I remember when I first read this, and I have a large science base in my educational background, and so when I read stuff like this, I immediately think of like on a molecular level, how atoms are constantly moving and vibrating and never sitting still, and they're always rotating around each other. And again, as above, so below. And so you have that in the sky, but you also have that on a very tiny level as well. And through reading all of this, I was just being able to like kind of revert back to that idea that like nothing is ever sitting still. Everything's constantly vibrating, creating like energy frequencies in that matter. And so it kind of just really ties into like the laws of attraction, especially because when you're emitting that energy, you're attracting that energy. And it seemed very appropriate for the concept. So thought I'd share.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like she talks a lot about that in chapter 4 too. I think she gets into more science around the sun and like solar flares and stuff. So that's cool that you have that background already, because it probably helps relate to the concepts more.
Mm-hmm. And being able to visualize what she's talking about and energy fields and what those would potentially look like if we could see them. But so the logos, let's see, does she have a specific term? What did she say? Our solar logos and 6 other great beings from 7 energy centers, cosmic logos. Well, so basically logos is like the God consciousness or omnipotent, all-knowing consciousness. And so by putting the solar logos, saying that there's a solar logos and a cosmic logos is saying generally just that there is a thought or a consciousness to the sun, or there's a consciousness to the whole cosmic sphere. It was like Earth consciousness or Venus consciousness. So solar logos would be like almost giving it a personification, if like maybe just a little bit of a personification of like it being a deity or a being that has its own conscious thought process, and that it's something that affects us. And so what's the other thing? Oh, there's a fun quote on page 9 that I also wanted to talk about too. So yeah, spiral, cyclic activity, the spiral. Yeah, so, oh yeah, omnipresence, telepathy. That's a fun thing that she just touches on in chapter 1, but of course gets more into in chapter 3. But, so yeah, she's kind of just laying down the basis for thought, ideas, energy of thought, how that functions and evolves. Like what is evolution of thought and what is the involution of thought or spirit, which is down into the matter. So this illustration that kind of does a nice job of showing the potential of a a way of spiraling up through evolution and a way of going back down into devolution, which is like it breaks it up and breaks it down rather into like molecular energy to like its most basic form, it seems, or like the amoeba. And there's another spiral image that I found online and does a nice job of just showing another, you know, the Nautilus shell or the way that time moves, the different octaves in this. And this is, where is this from? Oh, this is just a fun new agey illustration of energy and how it moves. Is this the chapter where she talks about energy as being a light particle
like
versus
it's
later? Yeah, I think that's in chapter 2.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
There's more in 4 about that too, I think. Cool. I think there was one thing I wanted to read before we move on to chapter 2.
Yeah, I have another thing too, really quick, also after you.
Okay. I just wanted to read this one sentence that just said the goal of our solar logos, as with all of us, is the expansion of consciousness, and he builds forms to be his instruments of experience. Obviously, we could make that into more gender neutral term, but I just thought that was a good takeaway with the solar logos in terms of what the personal goal is in terms of summarizing that part.
Thank you. Rounding it out. So in the last part of chapter 1, she goes into telepathy a little bit, and the one term that comes up is omnipresence. And I just wanted to ask you guys what that word means to you, or what that understanding is for you in terms of that word. Omnipresence. The floor is open.
Doesn't it mean like continuously always present? Like it's surrounding, whether you're paying attention to it or not, it's just constantly there. Whether you're giving it the awareness that it's constantly there.
Yeah, the om is all or of everything, omni and presence. So then the omnipresence would be another way of explaining like a logos, like a logos, which is all knowing. And like you were saying, whether or not you are aware of it, it is in existence, regardless of your perception of it. It exists outside of us. Oh yeah, and then there's the mind consciousness realization. There's 3 parts to the becoming of awareness within the mind, body, soul union. And she's saying that once these 3 parts of us is in connection, then we ourselves can become omnipresent of our reality in totality. And so the mental union is when we are reuniting the spirit soul complex with the physical body. And then the mind-body union is when there is a return of the unified body, soul, spirit to its initial oneness with the universe. And then the last one then is the mind-world unity, which is the unified psyche that realizes that it's in unity with all of existence. So that would be like the omniscient awareness then eventually. So it's like 3 parts of awareness is the way you evolve up into understanding your personal existence within reality. So chapter 2.
Levels of consciousness. So this was where we learned about the rays and the signs associated with the rays and kind of what that means. So their exoteric ruler, their esoteric, and the hierarchical ruler. And we learned what that meant. And then kind of more of the functions of esoteric astrology and how it works.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it was necessarily important for us to remember all of these connections in terms of the planets and their esoteric versus hierarchical or exoteric relationships, but that she was just giving that information to us to compare and contrast to see the differences between them. So if you're familiar with astrology already, you'll know the exoteric planetary rulerships for each of the signs. And then the esoteric ones is their inner relationship with each planet. And then you'll notice that Vulcan is included with these esoteric relationships. And you looked it up and learned a bit about what that is. You wanna
I
share?
didn't look up more about Vulcan. I just still have the information from my past in my head. I was just looking at the glyphs for you. But essentially, Vulcan isn't an actual planet. It's a point. It's a energy point that's kind of around the sun. And they thought it was a real celestial body way back when it was discovered. And then it was found that it wasn't an actual planet or any kind of thing. I don't really know exactly what it ended up being that they saw, but they kept the energy point. And it has its own, you know, frequency of energy that is supposed to be pretty good for your chart to know when you're studying esoteric astrology. All the esoteric astrologers from way back when were using it, but it got kind of controversial once it was discovered to not be something that scientifically, I think, was proven as a real thing. So not everybody really uses it, but some people, I think, that are just into this stuff will still look where it is and kind of look at the traits of that point and see where it is in the chart. And so I would say just maybe research it on your own, because I don't remember a lot about it or what it represents anymore. But you can, if you go to your whatever astro.com or whatever thing that you're using, if it has Vulcan, you would go to the hypothetical planet, because they don't even consider it like there's a whole list of hypothetical planets that are like the controversial, not real things. And that little thing, and then you see where it is in your chart, and then that adds to this study as well.
Mm-hmm. So that point then has relationships to the signs, and in this chapter she starts to introduce the modalities of the signs and the relationship to each other in that way, through the mutable, fixed, or cardinal modalities. And so these three modalities break down with 4 signs each. And if you are familiar with astrology, you know those 3 modalities. And she kind of also talks about the aspects between these modalities as well, slightly, with squares and trines, and how they correspond esoterically within the interpretation. So the traditional exoteric astrological interpretation of a triangle or trines in the chart, which is between similar elements between signs, which is 120 degrees, which makes a triangle in geometry and then in everything else. But so the trine aspects are traditionally described as being easy, or easy flow of energy, or good, or positive, or, you know, open for business.
Fast.
So there's something going through. And then the squares are usually connected to like difficulty, hardship, or like having to push through something. And the square is the 90-degree angle, and is explained in esoteric terms as the potentiality of spirit. So it can be difficult. Like there's multiple ways of understanding a square and a trine. Like, yes, it's a difficult experience to go through a pandemic and lose your job and not know where you're going to make your money and not know how you're going to pay rent. That would definitely be a square for sure. And in the chart or the horoscope for in your chart and transit wise. In esoteric perspective, it would be a potential. It would be a road towards creating some sort of change or friction that causes a reaction. So there's just multiple ways of seeing that. But then the esoteric perspective, it's going to be on a spiritual level. So spiritually speaking, there is potential for evolution through squares. And yes, if we think of them as like in the lower mind realm, then it would be difficult, frustrating, uneasy, so on and so forth. And then she talks about these constellations. What are constellations versus zodiac signs? And so traditionally we see the zodiac signs as being the main focus, but she's using the term constellation instead to keep us in mind of the stars that make up the constellation as a whole unit versus the caricature of Cancer that we see in a horoscope. And that works to help us understand the rays better, because when you see the constellations as multiple points versus an illustrated image, then the understanding of how energy moves through the actual space starts to sync up. So she's talking about Pleiades, Sirius, and the Great Bear, which is the Big Dipper, and how they have a correlation with how energy moves through the cosmos and this the galaxy for us. And so she decides that she's going to use the word constellation instead. There's 3 planets associated with each constellation, and these 3 planets create a triangle of flow or axis. And then she goes on to say how there's 5 kingdoms on Earth. There's the humanity kingdom, animal kingdom, plant, mineral, and sages. So she's starting to break up the levels of Earth for us and explains what those, they're not separate, but they just merge within each other. So, and then there's the 3 constellations for each ray, and then the esoteric planets and signs, which are listed. And then constellation for signs, and how the constellations interact with one another, and starting to open us up to seeing the constellations as beings, I suppose, or gods, so some would say, that interact with one another in the sky versus being stationary. Again, illustration of crap. So, yeah, do you have anything to add to all that?
No, I thought that sounded great.
She talks about 7 energy centers and the 7 chakras and really relates those to each other. The number 7, of course, is a very significant number for all of humanity, I'd say. You know, we have 7 days of the week, there's 7 chakra centers, and there's 7 planes of existence. There's 7 rays. So these 7 layers of being are synced up astrologically, physically, and spiritually in all different ways, even in a mundane way, because our days of the week. So she says too that each chakra center vibrates at different frequencies that correspond or communicate with different planets and constellations. And I was kind of seeing it as somewhat of a key, like the vibrations of each chakra is like a keyhole, and the way that planets sync up or the constellations sync up with each chakra is the key, and it unlocks the energy access to the chakra centers. And then it gets more complicated from there as the chapters go on. There's the planes of manifestation, logoic plane, monadic plane, atmos plane, Vedic plane, mental plane, astral plane, and the physical or etheric plane. So that was the homework assignment, was to memorize page 24, which had all the planes and their ray correlation, their planetary correlation, and what they represent in life correlation. So did you memorize it?
No, we tried to test each other today, and I did not. I think I had 5.
That was pretty good though.
4 or 5.
Because you just walked in, and I was like, what are the 7 planes? She got 5. I think that's pretty good. One way that I am trying to memorize it is that the top 4 end with ik, and the bottom 3 end with al. So seeing it visually, ik and al. There's 4 and 3. It starts at 1 at the top, which is interesting. Logoic. There's that word again, logos, and it's correlated with the sun. Monadic is universal love, and it's ray 2, correlated with Jupiter. The atmic reminds me of Adam, or the atomic, I think, world. Spiritual will, which is that burst of life or fire energy that really speaks to me as spiritual will. And then ray 3 and Saturn. The Buddhic intuition plane, intuitive plane, is ray 4 and corresponds with Mercury. The mental or mind plane is ray 5 and corresponds to Venus. And that may be confusing because you probably think, like, wouldn't Mercury be there? Because it's representative of the mind, intuition, and communication. But Venus is here, and the way that she kind of talks about it as it's the way that we share concepts is through Venusian aspects of life, which is art, philosophy,
Connection.
justice, connection, human connection.
Book club.
Yeah, and on the mental plane is where we cultivate our psychic connections with each other. And you can't have those psychic connections unless there's another person to be psychically connected to. Because you can be psychically connected, but to what? You can connect to animals, plants, trees, and all that stuff, but that still requires the opposition, the other, Venusian, Venus, Libra, Aries axis, another thing or being. Astral plane is the emotional body, and that's ray 6, and its planetary correspondence is Neptune and Mars. And the physical, etheric body, ray 7, Uranus. And that's a fun thing to think about because the physical plane, as we were saying before, is essentially vibrating at all times. So even though we're considering it a solid matter, it's not solid, right? It's still a network of vibrating little molecules within the air. And with it being connected or having correlation to Uranus really makes sense to me when I see the physical plane as non-solid, because Uranus is a planet of like connections, connecting. It traditionally rules the 11th house of friends, community, and I say the internet. So it's like the connecting planet of points between each other. And also is kind of like the space in between 2 points of connection, because Uranus is like space in between space or between points. Oh, there's so much in this chapter.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel about this chapter, chapter 2, since there is a lot? How did you feel about trying to memorize, if you guys even did try, for the correspondences and kind of some of the stuff that came after?
I tried. I think I'm like 80% there on the like memorization. I found that video that you guys sent out about esoteric astrology, that like YouTube video. I think it was the Theosophical Society one that you sent out, really helpful. I also felt like there, like in terms of like the levels of consciousness, there's crossover there, but like with evolutionary astrology. So that part was clicking for me, since that's where my head's been at the past few months. But the rays is like, I feel like, I don't know, it seems like a unique concept to esoteric astrology. So it's an exciting new layer to try to understand.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that video I was really excited about when Evelyn found it, because it was just like, oh, there's somebody just breaking it all down so easily for all of us after all these books I've read. What?
Yeah, it was super helpful.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it helps to make, I don't know, the way that he talks about the evolution of the soul through those signs is really helpful too. Because we also can connect those on the exoteric level with the human evolution, the gestation cycle of a human being through its consciousness, right? But then on the spiritual level, there's also the evolution that happens. And so, yeah, he did a really good job. I loved it. I guess the last thing she brings up in chapter 2 is humanity's consciousness, the 3 different types of consciousness that exists, like mass consciousness versus self-consciousness, and then group consciousness, and how, just what those things are, what it means, just bringing into our awareness those 3 different ways of relating to consciousness. She says mass consciousness is the internalized archetypal awareness of themes, ideas, concepts that groups of people share within each other. That's not necessarily a learned thing from the mental plane, but something that is just inherent within the experience. And then consciousness is, of course, your own personal consciousness within your own self, and then group consciousness is within, think, smaller groups of, like us, like this is a group consciousness experience where we're sharing one specific idea and terms and learning about that. So the fun chapter.
Yeah, this is the one Evelyn wants to talk about the most. Chapter 3, Mind and Telepathy. Evelyn wants to be a hypnotherapist, so anything telepathic and mind control oriented. Mercury conjunct Pluto.
Yeah, we're gonna say.
And Scorpio.
Yeah.
There's a hypnosis. What's the word?
Quality?
No, I was gonna say like you'll be a master at it.
And I think that it's a good way of using that power consciously.
We'll see as she gets older
In a
how conscious
positive way.
it'll be.
Well, it's very unconscious.
You'll
right now.
hypnotize yourself when you're like 60 and opposite the client, and they'll just, somebody will walk in, they'll just both be like,
Both of us sleeping, quacking like ducks for some reason.
both in your office quacking.
That's when I start to go senile and lose my mind. How is a senile hypnotist
I love it.
losing
I'm all
her
about
mind?
it.
That should be an SNL
I'm
skit.
here for it.
So fun chapter. What does Alice A. Bailey say at this beginning of this chapter for this quote? This quote by Alice A. Bailey: "It is all one vast system of transmission and of interdependence within the system, all received in order to give and to pass on to that which is lesser or not so evolved. Upon every plane, this process can be seen. So there is a sense of responsibility with learning this knowledge that is, because we know that all of our understanding and awareness comes from a mass consciousness rather than our own individual conscious understanding. Like thoughts and ideas, concepts, things like that come from something else. We do not create that within ourselves. We pull it from external. We are opening ourselves up. Hopefully the point of evolution is to become evolved enough to be able to grasp these higher minded concepts versus us pulling it from within, like we came up with these ideas. We never invent anything. We discover things because it's already in existence without us even having to be here. And so telepathy is kind of that, is what that is. It's tapping into a greater consciousness that is not of your egoic self, but one that exists, that is all around you. And again, there's this connection or understanding that it is not just with your own self, it is with another person, a collective, which is how telepathy works, or how it can be even proved for yourself that it is happening, that you're both parties or multiple people are tapping into one concept and being able to understand it in some way. Let me see what I wrote about this. Oh yeah. So she talks about the coworker in this. So you have coworkers that you gravitate towards, that you're able to connect with on a telepathic level. And I love that she used the word coworker because, of course, in my like 9 to 5 regimented mind, I'm still thinking of coworkers in like a box in a physical space. But I'm like, oh, right, yeah, that's what a coworker is. It's a group of people or another person that you're co-working towards a shared mental expression with. And when we're conscious of the people that we co-work with or cohabitate with, then we can be in control of what work we're doing on this planet and this earth, which is another thing she's talking about, which is like, what's the point of all this stuff anyway? The point is to evolve each other and elevate humanity to be able to come up to all of these awarenesses as a whole, not just for ourselves or to keep it and like lock it away in a box, but because it's not just us, it's not just one individual person, it's for everybody, which is the very Aquarian age type of concept too, the collective versus the individual.
Heck yes. She talks about 3 forms of consciousness: the anima mundi, the soul of all things, which is also related to the subconscious. The second is the human consciousness, and the third is the world of superconscious contact, which I thought was cool. I liked that. So those are the 3 forms of consciousness that we're supposedly able to tap into through telepathy. And I wrote it down, so I thought I'd share it. Let's see what else is here. Did you have more? You had something you were ready to share?
Yeah, I had a question for you guys. I wanted to know what your understanding of the difference between collective unconscious and the collective conscious was. Because we always talk about the collective unconscious, I feel like, but rarely really tap into the collective conscious. And so I was wondering for you guys what that meant for you and what, like, just how you interpreted those 2 terms. Go. That's all you. Jolene.
Hi. I've actually been studying Jung since I was really young, literally young. And so in my early 20s, and I'm about 30 now, and so in my early 20s, I started actually really diving deep into a lot of his works and his books, which was more than I could really chew at the time. But as I've gotten older, I've really been able to understand the concepts and the layers. So when you're asking about, what was it, collective consciousness as like a collective whole, which would be everything that we share. So right now would be like mass media, all types of media, all types of like anything shared verbally, I think, because it's all subject to the programming that we have. Everything that comes from our knowledge of programming from our parents, from our ancestors, and then somehow becomes more on this level of everyone can understand it. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah. And then what is the collective unconscious? Like, what is the difference between the two of those?
Oh, so, well, that we're all kind of coming from the same background, you mean? And so we all have a place where we dream. We all have a place where we have the same. I see. Okay. Give me a second on that one.
I liked where you were going
Yeah.
with that, though. I think that you were onto it.
To be able to put it into words, like I know what you're talking about, but it's like how to relate that.
Well, it's unconscious.
That's why we all have it, and then it's like how to English sentence. It's hard.
You just did it though by not doing it.
Yeah,
Because we all know what
that's
you're
the
talking about.
I think one of the other things that it got me kind of thinking about is on maybe like a not so macro level, just culture and how it evolves, and that we don't have maybe the self-awareness as a collective to really see where we're headed, but the things that are going on in the collective conscious right now are shaping where we're going next. And I think that's one way that I kind of thought of here we're at now, collective conscious. Collective unconscious is what's going on in the back of all of our heads, that's going in the back of many people's heads, that's taking us to that next step. And I think one of the things that this book has made me think about in a very real sense ties back to the co-workers and helping humanity evolve is, what are the co-workers like Esoteric Book Club and the members of it who are thinking about these things? How do we help influence the current collective conscious to shape the collective unconscious and what's going on in the background, and to continue that evolvement?
Yeah.
Body language, like knowing, it's almost like your shadow self, like the exterior of your, like the shadow lining of someone's like motives almost. Does that make sense?
Totally. I see it too. It's like when you talk to people that work with the Akashic field, and they go into the Akashic records of you and kind of go into your unconscious for you and work in that ethereal place. And then like when I've had that done with me, I'll have somebody tell me stuff that I do in my meditations, like work through dreams that I've had. And to me, that's also part of that unconscious. And like when the two get more married, the conscious and the unconscious, we're able to kind of go between those worlds. And, you know, that's like lucid dreaming and astral projection and those other centers of our mind. So I think that they're unconscious, but then we learn how to like travel between them. It's like the Hermes myth.
That's kind of how I was feeling it too, like in terms of the unconscious, the collective unconscious. Like the key takeaway for me from that little section was like, it includes a record of all human events that have ever transpired. So like all of our past lives, all of our evolution up until this point, and it belongs to like all humans as a race. Whereas like what Jolene was talking about, like on a more conscious level, like media, culture, and those kinds of aspects, that they're still collective, but they are a little bit more like individual, maybe depending on where we grow up and where we live and what we tune into.
Mhm. Yeah, she says too, in the collective conscious is in and of itself a God mind. So we're tapped into a logos as a humanity together, and that's actually the conscious part of us that we're working off of, and we're all individually experiencing consciousness, but as a part of a larger consciousness that we're always connected to. And yeah, like you're saying, the unconscious aspect of that is everything that is shaping humanity's evolution up until this point. And it's all there, like you're saying, and Lisa's saying, the Akasha is there at all times, and we're able to tap into it. And to our relationship to the different archetypes throughout history changes and evolves, and even our deities change and evolve, and that's a part of the collective unconscious as well, where we're creating if you consider like Buddha or Jesus, it is in itself a consciousness. It is like Jesus consciousness that we're all able to tap into collectively and understand in our various ways. And there is power in that. There's power in tapping into one mind, one logos together. Like that prayer meditation that happened like a month ago, how everyone was tapping in with one concerted thought and with one purpose to create or change, shift reality in some way, shape, or form. And that was the conscious part of us.
That's why we have so much war and so much pain over religion and spirituality. It's because people want to stop other people from manipulating reality with what they believe in terms of their thought forms, because people see meditation and telepathy as a dangerous thing, you know. And in my perspective, the more I study this stuff, it is. I'm not saying that validates war or killing people for different beliefs, but when you start really seeing how powerful the mind is in yourself and what you create or destroy in your own life, and you imagine large groups of people, you know, influencing the fabric of our universe, you can start to kind of understand how we got to where we got to and why people were fighting and hurting each other if they had beliefs that they thought were better or worse or whatever. So really want to practice my meditating, and she says that in the book too. She's like, that's why you want to understand certain cosmic energies, so you're not picking a random star in the galaxy and just meditating on it, because you don't really know what frequency you're tapping into. And the other thing too, she doesn't really cover it in this book, but when you do start reading like Alice A. Bailey, every book starts out with a whole thing about discernment and how a skeptical mind and a discerning mind is really important. And even like the Tibetan, like supposedly says, if this isn't relevant 100 years from now, burn all these books and don't listen to any of this. So the stuff that we're reading right now, like that was somebody that was self-aware enough of the power of information to know that it's still constantly evolving as we evolve as spiritual beings and humans, and that we need to stay in a state of evolution. We need to not continue to get stuck in the old ways as science and technology and information progresses, while still remembering the ancient, like where we came from and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that spiral that we're talking about with time not being linear and all of this type of stuff is really cool in relation to that, in relation to history and what we're doing here. And there's a lot of groups that meditate on triangles and that are all about being a humanitarian. So I think that you don't really need to be a part of that group to do it. You can find one and join one and do it with a group, because it's supposed that group consciousness is the most powerful way to evolve humanity. But you know, you can just learn this stuff and do it on your own, which she also talks about in the self-initiation part of chapter 2 as well.
And there are meditations in here at the end for that, to help guide the imagination in that direction. Yeah, I agree with you. I believe that the wars that happen now are wars on attaining our attention, and wars on moving the direction of imagination in one way or the other, and having control over the group consciousness and the collective and what it does. Because the people who go to war see it firsthand when they create armies of people to do what they tell them to do. They can see how much power is in that. And when they're able to direct and move people, humans around as in armies, and like conquer countries and just keep going, and like implementing their ideologies and their thought processes on other groups of people through that group power, which is an army, then it's like a very dangerous thing. And, you know, of course, the wrong person gets the information of like being able to manipulate reality through imagination and consciousness, gets the wrong idea and impressions, like, well, this seems easy, I'm just going to make, I don't know, I'm just going to, for self-interest purposes. So, and I think too, that's why when we learn this stuff, like in this book specifically, Carole Beckham is really trying to lay down the concept of like, this isn't just about you and your evolution, which she says in the beginning of chapter 2, I believe. This is a process of no, in chapter 3, it's a process of evolving everyone. And the responsibility that we have as evolved beings is to elevate those that are less evolved or under or deemed underneath, which, you know, it's not up to us to decide, but and that even the spiritual masters are wanting to evolve even higher, and they can't unless they help humanity evolve up to their place, because their place can't be like, they can't leave a void. They have to fill it with the same amount of energy that they created in that space in order to ascend up even higher. So it gives us the understanding and our idea that we can't do it alone. You have to bring people with you up in order to move up in the higher echelons of godliness.
So there's 3 types. Oh wait, sorry, am I getting ahead?
Oh no, were you gonna talk about the planetary memory?
No.
Oh, okay.
I jumped ahead.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, I'll just talk about it really quick. So planetary memory, so she says that energy, well, she doesn't, but she's relaying to us that energy retains memory. So energy itself holds memory, which would be the collective consciousness that we were talking about before, the Akasha. And planets have vibrations that retain memories within themselves. So we can meditate, like Annalise was saying, to different constellations, planets, stars, and connect or channel with that planetary energetic influence. And everyone has a unique vibratory keynote. So every single living thing, which would be our astrological charts, has a unique vibration to it, which corresponds with our 7 chakras. So, you know, some people are Venusian, some people are Marsians, some people are
both.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are very lunar. You know, they vibrate to different planetary energies.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say about the 3?
I was just going to say there's 3 different types of telepathy that she talks about at I guess it's not the end of the chapter. It's kind of the end in the middle. So there's intuitional telepathy, which involves the monadic, atmic, or buddhic planes and the head, heart, and ajna centers in the human body. There's mental telepathy, which involves the mental plane and the mind or manasic vehicle, with both the transmission and reception processes involve the head, ajna, and throat centers. And then there's empathic and instinctual telepathy, which are on the astral and physical etheric planes and are involved along with various combinations of the heart, solar plexus, sacral, and base centers. And when I was reading this, I thought this would be kind of a cool thing to ask if you guys feel like you've tapped into any of these before, like intuitional, mental, or empathic and instinctual. If you guys feel like you've had any experiences where you felt like you've tuned into those planes of telepathy.
Ooh, that's a fun question, because I felt like I was thinking about that when I was reading about the different planes.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask.
I don't know what you guys feel.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of us have tapped into that empathic telepathy, and that tends to be something that I try to get better control of as I go down my spiritual path, because I feel like at least like with where I'm at, a lot of times my empathic nature, like second chakra, will pick up so much that it actually clouds like the more mental telepathy. So I've been working on kind of turning down my second chakra when I need to like make sure that I'm tapping into like higher energy centers, or like working in a different, you know, like with my third eye or like throat chakra. But I don't know, I like this whole conversation has had me thinking, like, if my like, I find that I also like have that, like the ability of it, like either like summoning people, like anytime I think about somebody, like they pop up, or if I have that like, you know, kind of like intuitive nudge to reach out to somebody that's always like, I was just thinking about you or just talking about you. And I was like, I wonder if that's like my 11th house Mercury, where I feel like really tapped into my like friends in that way. That's just a personal anecdote, but
Yeah, I feel like that's totally mental telepathy.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because while I was reading this chapter, I messaged someone about we're selling their planners in here. And I was like, we have your planners. We just sold one. She's like, I'm literally a minute away from the shop to pick them up and talk to you about the planners. I was like, oh, that's funny because I'm reading this chapter on telepathy right now.
And then we burped at the same time while we were reading this too.
Our bodies are in sync, I guess.
I don't know which one that is. Empathic. Because I feel like it was her burp that I burped.
probably you're very empathic.
Empathic.
Yeah, an empathic.
Because I didn't even hear yours.
No, I kept mine in, and it was kind of like I didn't want it to happen. And then you were just like out with it. And then I was like, that's so weird because your sound synced up with my burp.
I projected it for you.
Yeah. She has a cleaner throat chakra.
Just let it out.
So I kind of have a weird question. Well,
Yeah.
not weird, but so thinking about like the telepathy and then the unconscious mind, like collective unconscious, where do you draw the line between like being able to unconsciously kind of tap into somebody versus like emotionally like you guys are super connected. I'm very connected with some of my best friends, and I'm always like, when can I thinking where would the line be drawn, being able to like subconsciously feel like when they're looking at me or when they're trying to communicate with me versus like really being able to understand on that emotional, like empathetic level of telepathy. Is there kind of like a line, or does it really just bleed together?
Well, she says that all the planes blend together, and if you consider your intuitive consciousness to be on one of the 7 rays or the 7 planes, it's like the physical etheric plane would be empathic, being able to feel when someone else is going to burp and then project it out for them. That's a physical plane empathic response. Or like sympathy pains is a very physical plane, empathic, psychic connection. Astral plane would be the emotional connection that you have with someone where you're both feeling the same emotional pains or emotional hurts or wounds or joy or excitement at the same time. And then the mental plane would be when you're connecting with someone on the intellectual level. And then you're like, oh, when you think about someone and then they call you, I think that's the very mental plane intuition. And then the Buddhic plane would be on the level of like, I think there's something wrong with my friend, or I think that she's like being more into the informational of what's happening, like having more of a bigger picture of the intuition that's coming up. That's what intuitives do, is they like draw pictures and thoughts and sounds. It's like more blending all of the mind, emotional, and etheric bodies together to create an actual intuitive picture that's coming through. And then the spiritual, and then all that is like moves on.
Did that answer your question?
Kind of. Like, I think I was kind of going more like, I think I'm just having a hard time understanding the author's perception of the difference between the rays. That was helpful, understanding that the telepathy that she's trying to communicate on is actually reverting back to the 7 different planes. But I think I'm just having a hard time being able to parallel the two ideas of that the planes are the collective unconscious that she's talking about, and that I think I may just need to go back and reread that because it's been a little while, but kind of taking away my, like, I don't want to say bias, but taking away everything that I kind of already have and being able to leave that and then read the chapter again and understand how her concept or where she's coming from with the whole, because now that I'm communicating with you guys, I have like kind of a different take on where this is coming from, because I haven't really talked to anyone about any of these concepts, and so they're just jumbled in my head. And so being able to hear what you guys are talking about is kind of like having to go back and kind of finite the details, and I think that's where I was coming from. Like, I just wasn't sure where she's coming with the collective unconscious and then the 7 rays, so I'll have to just kind of review that again.
Yeah, totally. I think one way that I can help maybe is just looking at it as, you know, you brought up the atoms, so this is something that you already kind of know in your mind. So think about the rays are all different vibrational qualities of atoms that are all kind of carrying a similar frequency. And those have their own like the ray has its own frequency, but then there's all these other frequencies and they're symbiotic, like they all coexist together. And so even though they're separate, they're still together. So telepathy, it's kind of saying like we have all these planes that it can exist on, even though it's still this one concept. There's different ways or frequencies that it's manifesting into. So when you're kind of saying like, what's the dividing line between my conscious telepathy versus my intuitive telepathy, that'll just be when you start feeling on a vibrational quality within the self in your 7 centers, those frequencies. And so when you're doing yoga that focuses on the chakras specifically, you will begin to feel the vibrations of those chakras. And they're like mandalas. That's why we see the chakra as a sphere or a mandala, because that's legitimately how the energy presents itself, is like a spiral, and it moves and it vibrates. And so when you become more sensitive in your body, maybe you've already experienced this, you'll feel the vibrations of your chakras. And sometimes it feels good and sometimes it doesn't. And that's those little vibrations and those kinds of feelings that you start getting in the body. They're not just concepts. It's like when she's saying like you will start visually seeing light rays that are associated with the rays, you will. Like it legitimately happens. And so that's just kind of the more we awaken and connect, like how she was saying, to all of the 7, our microcosm of the macro, the more we'll stop feeling the separation and we'll start feeling the relationship. And then you'll be able to tell that was an empathetic burp or whatever, or that was a mental telepathy, or that was a Buddhic plane, thing. And we all do it naturally already. It's like when you make that intuitional turn and you were like, oh my God, that was the right turn to make, like that's you on the telepathic intuitional plane. So now it's like we're putting kind of this framework to it that does kind of separate it a little bit, but it helps us understand the way it's all coexisting together. And so you can now do like little tests with yourself, where you think about somebody and then see what happens and maybe record it and see how long does it take for that person to receive your telepathy. And that kind of stuff is a fun way to play with it.
Yeah, write down all of your synchronicities for homework assignment.
I need to be more tangible with it because I'm very in my head with it. So I should just be more tangible with it and practice it more than just constantly having my nose in the book.
The spiritual plane is subtle. So allow yourself to be subtle. It's always detachment. So we're thinking of like the Chinese finger trap, where the harder we pull, the tighter it gets. The spiritual world is when we loosen, we let go. And it's all subtle. And so you'll start feeling it immediately the more you let go.
It just feels counterintuitive when it happens.
Especially if you have the mind of a scientist, because it's very like, so it feels, harder to do.
Yeah.
But then you'll be even more amazing having both worlds locked in.
And you'll question yourself all the time. You'll be like, was that really me? Or was that this? Or was that this? I think like the sooner you just tell yourself there's no such thing as coincidence, the faster we'll just like get through that process. Like, no, it wasn't a coincidence because they don't exist. So what else was that?
Right. Nothing's real. Everything is real.
You get it.
Yeah. Okay, well, should we just jump to chapter 4 really quick and kind of go over it kind of fast? So I wrote kind of more questions. So the first part, chapter 4, is very scientific, and I'm not going to get too into that because I'm not a scientist and I still don't even know what half this shit means. But the cool thing about it is she's really kind of showing you how through science we are affected on the earth through solar flares, through dark matter. Like it's been recorded, it's been proven. And that kind of is what people like Evelyn and I who study astrology really love hearing, because we're like, see, there's actual science that validates the planets are influencing our earth. So of course it should all matter. So that's what that whole beginning part of that was about. And I'm sure there's even, since this was written in the 90s, even more science about that now. And she also kind of breaks down the astrological year. But I think that moving forward, to kind of just make sure we end on time, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about the relationship between traditional and esoteric astrology. And then I had a couple of questions. Maybe I'll just pick one for us. But the first question that I'll just answer instead of asking is, what is the difference between, well, just for time's sake, right? What is the difference between traditional and esoteric astrology? And so on page 66, she shows this table that shows the difference. Traditional astrology deals with effects, while esoteric astrology deals with causes. Usually one ruler of a sign in traditional astrology acting on the personality level. And we've already said this, but to like kind of just visit it again, traditional astrology is more focused on the personality and mundane events. And then esoteric astrology is more focused on the soul, the evolution of the soul. Traditional astrology focuses on the influence of zodiacal constellations, while esoteric astrology is the zodiacal constellations plus the 7 rays. Traditional astrology is 12 houses, and esoteric astrology is 12 arms of 3 crosses. So that is a really big separation in that sense. And then traditional astrology looks at the aspects as conjunctions, oppositions, trines, squares, sextiles, plus minor aspects, where in esoteric astrology, we call it unity, polarities, triangles, crosses, and stars instead. So it's just kind of separating some of that terminology, which I find really helpful personally. And then she goes deeper into the zodiac and the 7 rays. Let's see what the other, so what are the 7 rays? That was kind of one of the questions that I wrote down. Let's see here. We each have a soul ray, a personality ray, a mental ray, emotional ray, and physical etheric ray. The combination of these rays has a profound influence on our qualities and determines how we will respond to life. So we understand the rays on their own, and then we look at our chart and find what rays are most prominent in our charts. And then that is kind of telling the story of our soul's evolution. What rays are we operating on within this life? And then that kind of helps us to understand more of our karmic journey as a soul instead of just the more mundane personality things. And then there's another thing she talks about is that traditional astrology and esoteric astrology do kind of have a symbiotic quality, because she says that in order to fully grasp esoteric astrology and your soul's purpose, you first need to understand the personality. So she says that traditional astrology plays a really important role because the personality is a huge foundation of who we are. And so the chapter gets into how to identify your soul ray and your personality ray, which was my last question to see if you guys actually finished chapter 4, is what is your personality ray and what is your soul ray, and how do you determine that?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Evelyn, tell me. Just kidding. Did anybody find theirs?
I didn't. What page is that on? I like read through this so fast with the intention, like, because I just couldn't stop. And then I had the intention of going back over all the chapters, but I reread over up to chapter 3 and then didn't go over 4 again. But I want to know what my rays are.
It's on page, okay, so if you go to 72 through 74.
Okay.
I'm going to read the example. So the example is, the sun sign indicates the nature of the person and holds the secret of right use of the personality ray. So the sun is the personality ray.
Okay.
The ascendant indicates possibilities, the spiritual goal, the purpose of the present incarnation, holds the clue to the right use of the soul ray. So the ascendant is the soul ray. This is usually interpreted to mean that the ray of the exoteric traditional ruler of the sun sign would be the personality ray, and the ray of the esoteric ruler of the ascendant would be the soul ray. So personality ray, so like I'm a Leo, so my exoteric planet is the sun. And then I would look and see what that ray is, right?
On which page? 24?
72. You can look on 22.
Rays.
It's
But
on
when you go, yeah, this is exactly where I was getting struggling, because
That's okay, Christine. I've been reading this shit for 3 years and it's just now making sense. So
I think there's another chart on 16 that has them all listed. The esoteric.
well, that's just what I'm talking about. Is I feel like there are quite a few charts here and I struggle to blend them together. And chart 16 is one of the ones that confuse me the most, because you've got the 3. So how do you, when you have the 3, because it's the planetary triangles, I can pick that up, but I struggle to pick up, and I can also understand, I mean, it's just like with all of the things on Elisa that we've done, I can understand the basic idea that your sun sign is, I mean, I lost where we read it. The sun sign is the personality ray versus the ascendant, which is the soul ray. But then I'm missing the chart that makes it just a little bit clearer to me.
well, the chart Evelyn had.
Bridges a gap.
She says there, it shows you here the exoteric for each sign. So the easiest way to do would be to look at find your sun sign on page 16, and then look and see what your exoteric ruler is. And then if you go to the page 72, that planet, it'll say what ray it's on.
It's also there too. Those are the 7 rays. Or I'm pretty sure, right? Because these are all the different rays.
Well, on page 16, for example, my sun sign's Cancer, and Cancer is referenced in ray 3 and in ray 7.
Mm-hmm.
So you look
But-
at the moon, and the moon is on.
But the moon's always, yeah, the moon's consistent. So then we go to page 72 when we see the moon, and then it's ray 2 Jupiter. Or is it ray 4?
The moon is ray 4 for your sun sign.
Got it. So it'd be ray 4.
Yeah, the traditional ruler of the sun sign would be the personality ray, and the ray of the esoteric ruler of the ascendant would be the soul ray. So you find the esoteric ruler of your ascendant. So I'm Sag rising, which the esoteric ruler of Sag is Earth. And so then I would see on page 72 that the Earth is on ray 3. So my personality is ray 2 and my soul is ray 3.
Oh, okay. So personality, sun sign, exoteric planet.
Yeah.
Soul sign, esoteric planet, ascendant. Got it. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, it's totally complicated. Just so you know, I wrote it wrong the first time I did it. I literally just figured it out the right way with you. Here. So, originally, I was doing it by my sign instead. So I was looking at Leo, which was on ray 1 and ray 5. And then I was looking at my Sagittarius, which is on ray 4 and ray 5. And so that's the rays for the sign. But you're looking at your planetary ruler, and they're saying that the planetary ruler of your sun is going to be exoteric for the personality ray. And then for the soul ray, you look to the ascendant because that's considered to be the soul, more expression. And then you look to the esoteric ruler for the ascendant. So that's definitely something that is a good note.
So let's all go to page 16.
Another question about that.
So let's just go to page 16 right now really quick.
Yeah, sorry.
Everyone's sun sign. So look at the sun sign for yourself. Find it on there. There's the exoteric planet, which is the traditional astrological ruler, the esoteric, and then hierarchical. And hierarchical we haven't gotten to yet. So, but this chart will be here for when we get to that, and then you can reference that column when we get to hierarchical. So let's just all go in a row. Everyone go through, find your sun sign, and then say what your esoteric planetary ruler is of your sun sign. So I'm Libra. My esoteric planetary ruler is Uranus for Libra sun. So Danielle, you go.
Okay. I'm an Aries, so my esoteric planetary ruler is Mercury.
Okay.
I'm
Christy.
an Aquarius, so she looked busy. I'm an Aquarius, so my esoteric is Jupiter.
All right.
Christy, you're up.
Okay. So Cancer sun sign, exoteric ruler is Moon, but also Neptune, and that's what I was going to ask. Okay. Tapping into multiple rays.
So some of these signs or constellations have multiple planetary rulerships, and so that's just something to consider, that the main one will be written first, and then the secondary will be written in a paragraph, a parentheses, I'm sorry. And then, so Scorpio has Mars and Pluto. That means that they're both equally the ruler for that sign. So for you, your Cancer, your exoteric planetary ruler is the Moon, and then like the sub ruler is Neptune. So then, but in esoteric astrology, it's Neptune, full through. So that's what the difference is between the parentheses and the slash.
All right. Thank you, Evelyn.
Mm-hmm. So then your soul sign versus your What was the other one?
It's personality. And personality is exoteric, soul is esoteric, and personality is the sun, and ascendant is the soul.
So that's all written on page 73. And you can go through that.
But that's going to be really important
more.
as we move forward, is understanding kind of some of those concepts, because that's kind of how it works as you learn how to use it in your chart.
So reread probably the end of chapter 4, I think, is a good homework. Yeah. And then really go through the 1 through 12 bullet points in the last pages of chapter 4. And then for the next meeting, we're just going to read chapter 5. So it's not going to be so heavy because we're getting into more of the intricate, detailed information that requires our mental energy. So yeah, just chapter 5, just really go through, really meditate over them, write them out on paper, write out the different charts, give yourself note cards, make note cards with the different planetary rulerships. Like for me, I'm very tactile, so I like to write it out in order to memorize it. So I basically will just copy verbatim what's there. And then also write out postcards or note cards and like flashcards for yourself. If color coordination works for you, then color coordinate each ray with the 7 chakras and maybe just do it one by one and go through it. But yeah, we'll have a month to go through all of it. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out and email us at themysticparlor@gmail.com. And we'll be finding resources for you guys that help a little bit more to, I guess, and like other people that explain it in their own different ways, which will help to synthesize the information a bit more, because it's really just about hearing it in multiple different ways that makes sense for you and me and Annalisa. So and then the meetings are to regurgitate what we've been retaining in order to hopefully put all the pieces together.
Yeah, super helpful. It was really helpful. Just reading it and just kind of getting bogged down by it. It was really nice to like kind of listen to you guys kind of summarize it. Again, because I don't really have any, I'm just here by myself. And so it's hard to kind of like really reiterate some of these ideas or bounce ideas or, you know, have it fluidity come out of it. And so it just kind of gets lost. And I'm a trine air sign, so it's just all stuck in my head all the time. So all 3 of my major signs are all air. And so I'm just always up here all the time. So it's hard to kind of really like get it out into words and get it down. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to kind of go over this with us too. It's been a lot of fun.
I don't know how other people feel, but I would be down to exchange like email addresses or contact info if anybody wants to, I don't know, talk about stuff as we're going through it, like even before the monthly meetings. I would be down.
Awesome.
Beautiful. Yeah, into it.
Well, why don't you guys email themysticparlor@gmail.com, and then we'll create a little email thread between 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 of us, and whoever happens to jump on these calls with you.
Can I leave us with one more homework?
I bought her book. I was hoping she'd be here.
I got one too. I love it.
I got both of them. My planner's over there.
I'm going to give you guys one more homework if it's something that you guys don't know. So we kind of skimmed over the initiation part of chapter 2, and I forgot I wanted to mention this. But in order to understand the initiation through the 12 signs, you can also read the mythology of Hercules' tests. And then she wrote 9 possible initiations for humans, which is also represented in his fight with the 9-headed Hydra. So those are kind of some fun ways to look at some of the Greek mythology in relation to some of the other concepts, because all those concepts evolved from deeper wisdom.
We should put that in the email.
I was just gonna ask if you're gonna do another homework email. I missed the last one and I'm kicking myself, but I will be waiting with bated breath for the next one.
You didn't get it? Is it?
I got it. I just didn't see it until today.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, it's going in spam now because yeah.
No, mine's not even in spam. It's just that it got lost in the sea of buy more shit. It's capitalism and everybody's stuck at home. It got lost in that email.
Oh, got
A
it.
whole
Yeah.
separate email just for all of my like online learning and astrology and esoteric learning and stuff like that. So that's in a totally separate categorized email address. So highly suggest, because I'm studying so much stuff right now. And so I highly suggest doing that because, yeah, otherwise it gets lost and stuff and it's never.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I might do that. Thank you.
Great. Well, it was so fun chatting with you guys. Thank you for coming, and we're excited to see you again next month. And we'll be in communication via email. We'll be more active with the book club now. So we're looking forward to continuing on, and write down any questions that you have as you keep learning, and we'll do that thread. And then, yeah, we'll see you guys live next on June 18th, same time. All right.
All right, good night, guys. Bye.